Welcome back to the channel. Before we begin tonight's chilling story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new horror tale. And I have a question for you. What city are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read your comments with great excitement, and I love seeing where everyone is watching from around the world. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin tonight's terrifying story. The keypad clicked behind me at 9:43 p.m., and for one stupid second, I thought Mr. Harlan had come home early. I was standing in the kitchen with a half-cut cucumber in my hand, wearing one of Sophie's glitter stickers on my sweatshirt because her little brother had stuck it there during dinner. The house was quiet in that heavyway nice houses get quiet. No traffic outside, no neighbors yelling, no old pipes knocking in the walls, just the beep of the keypad. Then the front door lock turned by itself. I need to explain something before I get to that part, because when I tell people this, they always ask the same question. Why didn't you leave earlier? And the answer is embarrassing. I needed the money. I was 24, living in Columbus, Ohio, sharing an apartment with a girl from my old community college who I barely knew, and working part-time at a daycare that paid like they were doing me a favor. I babysat on weekends because daycare rent and real rent are apparently two different kinds of punishment. I was behind on my car payment. My mom had just had surgery and kept pretending she didn't need help. So when a family in Dublin offered me $30 an hour to watch their two kids on a Friday night, I didn't ask many questions. The Harlans lived in one of those newer neighborhoods where every house looks clean enough to be fake. White brick, black windows, trimmed bushes, little porch lights that came on automatically when the sun went down. Their house had cameras everywhere. Not hidden ones, at least not the ones I noticed at first. There was one above the garage, one at the front door, one pointed at the driveway, and another little black dome tucked under the back patio roof. Mr. Harlan answered the door before I even knocked. He was maybe late 30s, tall, polite in that stiff corporate way. He had a fleece vest on over a button-up shirt, like he was dressed for a meeting about hiking. His wife, Nora, was rushing around behind him trying to find earrings. "Lena," he asked. "Yeah, hi." He smiled, but his eyes flicked past me toward the street before he stepped aside. The kids were in the living room. Sophie was 8, thin, quiet, with brown hair cut just under her chin. Her little brother, Max, was 5 and immediately asked if I knew how to make dinosaur pancakes. Mr. Harlan gave me the usual tour. Snacks, bedtimes, Wi-Fi password, emergency numbers on the fridge. Max needed his blue cup or he would start a court case, according to his mom. Sophie had a reading log. Then he pointed to a small monitor mounted under one of the kitchen cabinets. It showed 4 security camera feeds in squares. Front porch, driveway, living room, upstairs hallway. You can check the monitor in the kitchen anytime, he said. Just for safety. We had some package thefts in the area last year, and I like knowing the kids are okay. Nora rolled her eyes gently, like this was an old argument. He likes gadgets, she said. Ignore him. Mr. Harlan laughed, but not really. Before they left, Sophie came into the entryway holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Her dad bent down and kissed her forehead. "Be good," he said. She nodded. Then she looked up at the small camera in the corner of the living room ceiling. Not at me. Not at her parents. At the camera. The second the front door shut, Max sprinted to the couch and yelled that I had to watch him jump from cushion to cushion because the floor was lava. Sophie sat on the rug with her knees pulled up, flipping through a book but not reading it. Everything was normal for the first hour. That's the part that bothers me now. How normal it felt. We made boxed mac and cheese. Max got cheese powder on his shirt and told me not to tell the government. Sophie laughed at that a little. I helped her with a math worksheet. It started raining around 7, soft at first, then harder, tapping against the big kitchen windows. The house had smart lights, and they kept changing slightly as the night went on, dimming in some rooms without anyone touching anything. Mr. Harlan had shown me the control panel, so I wasn't worried. Rich people houses do things on their own. That's what I told myself. At 7:38, I caught Sophie staring at the living room camera again. It was a tiny black circle above the built-in shelves. I smiled at her and waved at it, just being silly. She grabbed my wrist so fast I almost dropped Max's plate. "Don't," she whispered. I looked down at her hand. Her fingers were cold. "Don't what?" "Don't wave at the living room camera," she said. I gave a little laugh, because I thought she was embarrassed. "Why?" She looked toward the kitchen, then back at the camera. "He doesn't like that." I thought she meant her dad. Some parents are weird about cameras. Some parents are weird about everything. I worked at a daycare. I had seen dads argue over whether another kid's birthday cupcake counted as processed food. So I just said, "Okay, no waving." Sophie let go of me, but she didn't relax. At 8, I put Max in pajamas. He complained for 11 straight minutes, and then passed out before I finished the second page of his dinosaur book. Sophie brushed her teeth without being asked. That should have been nice, but the whole time she kept pausing like she was listening for something behind the walls. Her room was at the end of the upstairs hallway. Pink curtains, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. A little white noise machine shaped like a cloud. I was tucking her in when she said, "Did my dad tell you about the cameras?" "Yeah," I said. "He said they're for safety." Sophie looked at me in a way no 8-year-old should look at an adult. Like she was checking how much truth I could handle. "There are more than the ones he tells people about." I stopped pulling up the blanket. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Rain clicked against her window. Somewhere downstairs, the ice maker dropped a few cubes into the freezer, and I jumped like an idiot. Sophie whispered, "The other babysitter found one in the bathroom vent." My stomach tightened. "What other babysitter?" "Emily." I tried to keep my face calm. "Did Emily tell your parents?" Sophie nodded. "What happened?" "She stopped coming." Sophie picked at the edge of her blanket. "Mom said Emily got paranoid. Dad said she didn't understand security." I wanted to call Nora right then. I should have. But it was this weird gray area where I didn't know what was real. Kids repeat things wrong. Maybe there was a camera near a hallway bathroom, not in it. Maybe Sophie misunderstood. Maybe Emily really had overreacted. And I kept thinking about $30 an hour. That sounds awful, but it's true. I told Sophie I'd be downstairs if she needed me. She didn't ask me to keep the door open. She asked me to keep it closed. I went back to the kitchen and checked my phone. Nora had texted once around 7:30. "Everything okay?" I typed, "Kids are great. Max asleep. Sophie almost down." I stared at the message, wondering if I should add, "Hey, weird question, are there hidden cameras in your house?" I didn't. I set my phone down and started cleaning the dishes. That was when I noticed the monitor. The kitchen feed was on it. Not the living room. Not the driveway. The kitchen. I was looking at myself from high up in the corner above the pantry, chopping vegetables earlier. Except there was no visible camera there. I turned slowly and looked at the corner. Nothing. Just smooth white wall and crown molding. On the monitor, I watched myself turn and look at the corner. There was maybe a half-second delay. I backed away from the counter. The feed flickered. Then the 4 squares rearranged themselves. Front porch. Driveway. Upstairs hallway. Kitchen. My skin went cold. I stepped closer and touched the buttons under the monitor, but the image changed before I pressed anything. The upstairs hallway filled the screen. Sophie's bedroom door was closed, and a man was standing outside it. He had a dark hood up and one hand resting flat against her door, like he was feeling for movement on the other side. I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember my socks slipping on the wood floor, my shoulder hitting the stair rail, and the sound of my own breath turning sharp and ugly. I got upstairs in maybe 5 seconds. The hallway was empty. Sophie's door was closed. No man. No footsteps. No wet prints. Nothing. I opened her door so hard the doorknob hit the wall. Sophie sat straight up in bed, eyes wide, already awake. "What?" she whispered. I couldn't speak for a second. I looked in her closet, under the bed, behind the curtain. I checked Max's room, bathroom, laundry room, every upstairs door. Nothing. When I came back to Sophie, she was crying silently. "You saw him," she said. That sentence made my knees feel weak. "He kautsits pu her built." "Who is he?" She shook her head, so hard her hair stuck to her cheeks. "I don't know. He talks through them sometimes." I felt like the floor shifted under me. Through what? The cameras. I wanted that to be impossible. I wanted her to be making it up. Then, from downstairs, the kitchen monitor beeped. Once, twice, 3 times. Sophie covered both ears. I grabbed her hand and took her to Max's room. I woke him up, which made him start crying immediately, and I hated myself for how rough my voice sounded when I told him to put on his slippers. I called Nora, straight to voicemail. I called Mr. Harlan. He picked up on the second ring, but before I even finished saying his name, he said, "What's wrong?" "There's someone on your cameras," I said. "I saw a man outside Sophie's door." Silence. Then he said, too calmly, "Are you upstairs right now?" "Yes." "Take the kids to the primary bedroom and lock the door." That scared me more than anything else. Not what man. Not, "Are you sure?" Just instructions. I said, "Is someone in the house?" "No," he said quickly. "No, I don't think so." "You don't think so?" "Lena, listen to me. Do not touch the monitor again. Take the kids into our bedroom. Lock the door. I'm calling the police." But I was already moving. Mr. Harlan stayed on the phone while I pushed Sophie and Max down the hall. The primary bedroom had a keypad lock on the door, which I thought was weird until that night. He gave me the code, and my fingers messed it up twice before it clicked open. Inside, everything smelled like clean laundry and expensive candles. I locked the door. Max was sobbing into Sophie's shirt. Sophie just stared at the TV mounted on the wall across from the bed. The TV turned on. Nobody touched the remote. A black and white camera feed appeared. It was us. From inside the bedroom. High angle. Near the smoke detector. I said something I won't repeat here. Mr. Harlan heard me and went quiet. On the TV, our live image changed to the kitchen. Then the living room. Then Max's room. Then it showed the front porch. Empty. The rain looked silver under the porch light. A text came through on my phone from an unknown number. "Tell Sophie to stop looking at the cameras." I dropped the phone on the bed like it had burned me. Sophie saw the screen before I could hide it. She started whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over. From the phone speaker, Mr. Harlan was saying my name. I picked it up with shaking hands. "He texted me," I said. Mr. Harlan swore under his breath. That was when I understood something. He knew. Maybe not all of it. Maybe not who it was. But he knew this wasn't some new thing that started with me. The TV changed again. This time it showed the kitchen from that impossible angle above the pantry. But the kitchen was empty. Then a black-gloved hand reached into frame and set something on the counter. A key fob. Mr. Harlan stopped talking. I heard Nora in the background ask, "What? What is it?" I said, "Is that yours?" He didn't answer. The front door keypad beeped downstairs. Once. Twice. Then it played a little rising tone. Unlocked. I looked at the bedroom door. The house went completely silent, except for the rain and Max trying to breathe through his crying. I called 911 from my phone and put Mr. Harlan on speaker on Sophie's tablet, because I didn't want to hang up on either one. The dispatcher asked for the address. I gave it from the fridge magnet I had photographed earlier, because I always do that now with new babysitting jobs. Back then it was just habit. "Are you inside the house now?" she asked. "Yes." "Where is the intruder?" "I don't know. The front door just unlocked by itself." "Stay where you are. Do not confront anyone." I almost laughed because my legs were barely working. Then we heard the first step. Not upstairs. Downstairs. A slow creak from the entryway. Then another. Someone was inside. The TV went black. A second later, audio came through the bedroom speaker system, low and fuzzy. A man's voice said, "Sophie." Not loud. Not angry. Just close. Sophie made a small broken sound and pressed her face into my side. I moved the kids into the closet because it was the only place with another door. I pushed Nora's laundry baskets in front of them like that meant anything. I held the closet handle with one hand and my phone with the other. The dispatcher kept asking what I heard. Footsteps. Then nothing. Then the downstairs pantry door opening. Then a drawer. Then the soft chime of the security monitor. The person downstairs wasn't rushing. That's what messed me up. They were moving through the house like they had practiced it in their head 100 times. A minute later, there was a knock on the bedroom door. 3 gentle taps. Max stopped crying instantly. Not because he was calm. Because he was too scared to make noise. The dispatcher told me officers were close. The knock came again. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't open it. Another buzz. Another. Finally, the notification preview appeared. Lena, the closet is a bad place. I looked up. There was a tiny black dot in the closet ceiling vent. I pulled the kids out so fast Sophie stumbled. I dragged them into the bathroom attached to the bedroom and locked that door too. It was stupid. Another door. Another cheap lock. But it was something. The bedroom door keypad started beeping. Whoever was outside was entering codes. Wrong code. Beep. Wrong code. Beep. Wrong code. Then Mr. Harlan, still on the tablet, shouted, "It locks out after 5 tries." The beeping stopped after the 4th. For about 10 seconds, there was nothing. Then the person outside laughed quietly. Not a movie laugh. Not evil. Just amused. Like we were being difficult. Police lights hit the bathroom window at 10:02 p.m. red and blue flashing against the frosted glass. I remember the dispatcher telling me to stay locked in until officers announced themselves. I remember hearing yelling downstairs. Real yelling. Boots. Radios. Someone shouting, "Police. Show me your hands." The man ran out the back. They caught him 2 streets over hiding behind a landscaping trailer. His name was never given to me officially, because I wasn't family, but one officer accidentally said his first name while taking my statement. Aaron. He was 31. He lived less than a mile away in an apartment over his aunt's garage. He wasn't some genius hacker from another country. He wasn't part of a ring. He installed home theater systems and smart locks for a living. That was the part that made me sick. Months earlier, Mr. Harlan had hired a local contractor to upgrade the security system. Hidden cameras, extra access points, backup recording, remote viewing. He told police he did it because he was worried about break-ins, but Nora found out during the investigation that he had put cameras in places she didn't know about either. Hallways, kitchen, bedrooms, vents facing doors. Not bathrooms, according to the official report, though Emily, the old babysitter, apparently disagreed. The contractor had copied the admin login before the job was done. After that, he watched. That's what the police said. He watched for months. He learned when Nora took Max to speech therapy, when Mr. Harlan left for work, which window Sophie opened when she wanted air, where the spare key fob was kept before Mr. Harlan moved it, which camera angles had blind spots. The footage of the man outside Sophie's door hadn't been live. It was from 3 nights earlier, when the family was asleep, and he had tested how far he could get inside before the system alerted anyone. He sent it to the monitor while I was there, because he wanted to scare Sophie into silence. Or maybe he wanted to scare me out of the house. Nobody could decide. Security footage showed me running upstairs at 8:51 p.m. It showed the front door unlocking at 9:47. It showed him entering with a copied temporary code that should have expired weeks earlier. It showed him standing in the downstairs hallway for almost 2 full minutes, looking up at the living room camera like he was waiting for someone to notice. He had a backpack with zip ties, duct tape, a signal jammer, and a folding knife. I don't like thinking about that. I had to give a statement twice. Once that night wrapped in a blanket in the back of an ambulance, because I couldn't stop shaking, and again the next morning at the station. Sophie gave hers with a child advocate present. Max apparently told an officer, the bad cameraman knew my name, and then asked for fruit snacks. The Harlans moved before the trial. I quit babysitting. For a while, I couldn't sit in any room with a smoke detector above me. I taped over my laptop camera, then my phone camera, then the little sensor on my TV remote, even though I knew that one didn't matter. I still check hotel rooms in a way that makes people uncomfortable. Vents, clocks, corners, mirrors, tiny holes in shelves. People think paranoia is when you imagine danger where there isn't any. But sometimes paranoia is what's left after you were right. The last thing I heard about Sophie was that she was doing better. Her mom sent me a message almost a year later thanking me for keeping them safe. I never answered because I didn't know what to say. I didn't keep them safe. I got lucky. That's the honest version. Sometimes I replay those few seconds in the kitchen. The cucumber on the cutting board, the rain on the windows, my own face on a camera that wasn't supposed to exist. And I think about how many normal houses I've walked into without looking twice. How many parents say, the cameras are just for safety? How easy it is to believe them. The worst part is, I still remember that text word for word. Tell Sophie to stop looking at the cameras. Not stop screaming. Not stop talking. Stop looking. Because she knew. That little girl had known for months that someone was watching her, and every adult around her had explained it away. I don't wave at cameras anymore. I don't even look at them unless I have to. At 9:17 p.m., the baby monitor on the kitchen counter played back my own voice, saying a prayer I hadn't spoken since my little brother disappeared. I was standing barefoot on the Whitcombs' white tile floor, holding a bottle of warmed milk I didn't need anymore, because their daughter had already fallen asleep 20 minutes earlier. The monitor sat beside the sink, old and square, with a cracked blue casing and a strip of yellowing tape across the battery cover. It wasn't one of those sleek camera monitors parents use now. It was the kind with a plastic antenna you had to tilt until the static softened. And from its tiny speaker came my voice at 9 years old. Keep Jonah safe. Keep the door shut. Don't let him wake up scared. Then the static swallowed the rest. I'm Mara Ellis. I was 23 then, living in Cedar Run, Ohio, taking night classes for nursing and working mornings at a bakery where my hands always smelled like yeast. Babysitting was how I kept my phone bill paid and my car out of repossession. My mom had moved into assisted care that spring, and every extra dollar went toward keeping her in a place that didn't smell like bleach and microwaved soup. The Whitcombs found me through a babysitting app. Leah Whitcomb was a pediatric dentist with soft hands and a careful smile. Her husband Daniel sold insurance and laughed at things 1 second too late. They lived on Briar Lane, in a gray house with black shutters and a porch swing that moved even when there wasn't wind. Their daughter's name was Elsie. She was 4, small for her age, with blunt-cut brown hair and serious eyes. When Leah introduced us, Elsie stood half-hidden behind her mother's dress and held up one hand. She doesn't like bedtime, Leah said, smoothing her daughter's hair. But she sleeps hard once she's down. Daniel handed me the monitor like it was fragile. Old school, he said. The Wi-Fi one kept dropping. This thing never does. I almost joked that it belonged in a museum, but then I saw the sticker on the back. A small orange moon, peeling at one corner. For a second I was back in my childhood hallway, staring through a cracked bedroom door at that same sticker glowing under a nightlight. I told myself there were probably 1,000 baby monitors with moon stickers. Parents put stickers on everything. Leah noticed me looking. Thrift store find, she said quickly. Daniel likes vintage junk. Daniel smiled, but his eyes moved to the stairs. Before they left, Leah gave me the usual instructions. Elsie could have one story, no juice after 8, no upstairs except her room and the bathroom, and no opening the door for anyone. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, if the neighbor comes over, don't let her scare you. Mrs. Rusk, Daniel said. She's harmless. Leah's smile tightened. She gets confused. They were gone by 7:42. The house became quiet in that deep, expensive way houses get when the air vents barely whisper and every appliance is hidden behind a cabinet panel. I gave Elsie her story, a book about a rabbit looking for its blue mitten. She kept staring past me at the baby monitor on her dresser. You can hear downstairs? She asked. Yep. Can downstairs hear back? I looked at the receiver clipped to my jeans. No, it only listens. Elsie blinked slowly. That's not true, she said. I thought it was a kid's imagination, the kind that turns laundry baskets into monsters. I tucked her in, left the door open the 3 inches Leah had shown me, and went downstairs. For almost an hour, nothing happened. I washed Elsie's cup. I answered 2 texts from my mom's care coordinator. I ate 3 crackers from my purse. Rain started tapping the kitchen window, soft at first, then harder, making the porch light blur. At 8:56, the monitor hissed. I turned the volume down. Then Elsie whispered, Mara. I froze with my thumb on the little plastic wheel. Her room was directly above the kitchen. The ceiling creaked once, not like footsteps, more like the house settling into itself. Mara, she whispered again. I picked up the receiver and went upstairs. Elsie was asleep on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. Her mouth was closed. Her breathing was slow and even. The stuffed rabbit rested on the pillow beside her, its button eyes reflecting the hallway light. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting for her to move. She didn't. Back downstairs, I checked the receiver. The green light flickered steadily. I had almost convinced myself it had picked up another house. Old monitors did that sometimes. Baby monitors, cordless phones, truck radios. My dad used to say they were little radios for ghosts, then laugh when my mom told him to stop scaring us. I changed the channel from A to B. The static cleared. A second voice came through. Not Elsie's. Not mine. It was calm, close, and older, like someone speaking with their mouth near the microphone. Don't come upstairs. The words were so clear that I looked over my shoulder, expecting to see Daniel standing in the kitchen doorway. No one was there. The porch swing knocked once against the siding. I grabbed my phone. 17% battery. No missed calls. No service bars, which made no sense because Leah had texted me from the driveway earlier. I was about to call anyway when someone tapped on the back door. 3 soft knocks. Through the glass, I saw an old woman in a green raincoat holding a covered dish with both hands. She had white hair pinned under a plastic scarf and eyes that looked too awake for her face. I didn't open the door. She leaned toward the glass. "You're the Ellis girl," she said. I hadn't told anyone my last name except Leah. I held up my phone like I was recording. I wasn't. "I'm not supposed to open the door." "Good," she said. "Then you listen better than the last one. What do you want?" Her eyes flicked past me toward the ceiling. "If you hear a child on that monitor, don't answer. If you hear yourself, leave." The monitor crackled behind me. Mrs. Rusk's mouth barely moved. "And if he says not to come upstairs," she whispered, "believe him." The kitchen light blinked off. Only for a second. When it came back, Mrs. Rusk was gone. The covered dish sat on the back step in the rain. I locked the deadbolt, even though it was already locked. The monitor whispered my name again, but this time it was not Elsie's voice. It was Jonah's. I hadn't heard my brother's voice in 14 years, not really. Only in old family videos my mother stopped watching after the police took our house apart and found nothing. Jonah was 4 when he vanished. I was 9. We had shared a room because our rental was too small, and that night I had left him alone to sneak downstairs for a bowl of cereal. When I came back, his bed was empty, the window was locked, and the baby monitor was buzzing on the dresser. For years, I remembered only one thing clearly: the orange moon sticker. I walked to the counter and turned the monitor over. The tape on the battery cover had a corner lifted. Under it, scratched into the plastic with something sharp, were 3 letters. J. Jonah Ellis. The kitchen tilted in a way that had nothing to do with dizziness. I sat down hard on one of the stools and held the monitor like it might bite me. This wasn't a similar monitor. It was ours. I called Leah. The call failed. I tried Daniel. Failed. I tried 911, and the screen showed searching for service until the battery dropped to 12%. Then the upstairs floor groaned. Not one step. Several. Slow, dragging steps from Elsie's room to the hallway. I stared at the ceiling. The monitor clicked. Jonah's voice whispered, "Mara, open the little door." I knew what he meant before I knew why. At the end of the upstairs hallway in our old house, there had been a crawlspace door. Jonah used to hide toys in there. I remembered police opening it with flashlights. Empty insulation. Dust. A dead wasp nest. But this was not our old house. The dragging steps stopped over the kitchen. Another voice came through, the same calm one from before. "Not yet." A small thump sounded behind the wall beside the pantry. I backed away from it. The wallpaper there had a seam I hadn't noticed earlier. Not a pantry at all. A narrow painted door had been disguised into the wall, its little brass knob the same color as the pattern. I told myself it was a utility closet. I told myself not to touch it. Then Elsie screamed upstairs. That was the sound that made me move. Not courage. Not stupidity. A child screamed, and every practical thought got shoved aside. I ran up the stairs with my phone flashlight shaking in my hand. Elsie's bedroom was empty. Her blanket lay folded at the foot of the bed, too neat, like someone had made it after lifting her out. The stuffed rabbit sat upright against the pillow. Its stitched mouth had been cut open, and inside was a rolled piece of yellow paper. I should have left then. I know that. I should have run out into the rain and kept running until I found porch lights and people. But Elsie was gone. I unrolled the paper. It was a drawing done in crayon. Three stick figures stood in front of a gray house. One was a small girl labeled me. One was a taller girl labeled Mara. The third was scribbled over so hard the paper had torn. Above them, in careful red letters, someone had written, "He only talks through things that have held a child's voice." Behind me, the monitor crackled. I turned. The receiver was on Elsie's dresser. I had left it downstairs. Its green light pulsed. From the speaker came Daniel Whitcomb's voice, faint and trembling. "Leah, I told you not to use her name." Then Leah, crying softly, "It wanted an Ellis." The house answered with a sound like someone laughing inside the vents. I ran for the stairs. The hallway stretched too long. I don't know how else to say it. Elsie's room was 3 doors from the staircase when I came up. Now there were 6 doors, all painted white, all with brass knobs, all cracked open 3 inches. From the last door, Elsie whispered, "I'm cold." The calm voice said, "Don't." I stopped. Rain hammered the roof. My phone was at 6%. In the thin beam of light, I saw small muddy footprints crossing the hallway. A child's footprints. They didn't lead from Elsie's room. They led to it. Something knocked from inside the wall. 2 knocks. Then 1. That was Jonah's old way of asking if I was awake. I whispered, "Jonah?" Every door in the hallway opened another inch. The smell came next. Not rot. Not smoke. Cereal milk. Damp carpet. The lemon cleaner my mother used after the detectives left our house. I backed down the stairs 1 step at a time. At the bottom, Elsie was standing in the kitchen. She wore her pink pajamas. Her hair was dry. Her eyes were open, but she looked half asleep. In her arms, she held the old baby monitor. "Mrs. Rusk said you'd come back early," she murmured. I lifted her and ran. The front door wouldn't open. The deadbolt turned, the knob turned, but the door stayed sealed as if the rain had nailed it shut from outside. Behind us, upstairs, every floorboard began to creak at once. I carried Elsie to the back door. On the step, the covered dish was gone. In its place was a brass key on a red ribbon. Elsie looked at it and shook her head. "That key is not for your door," she said. The monitor in her arms clicked. My brother's voice whispered, "Mara, please." For 1 second, the kitchen changed. I saw our old bedroom instead of the Whitcombs' kitchen. Jonah's bed against the wall. My blanket on the floor. The orange moon sticker glowing on the monitor. And behind the crawlspace door, fingers curled around the edge, pale and patient. The calm voice cut through the static. "Take the child and go." I grabbed the key anyway. Not because Elsie told me not to, because the front door had no other keyhole, and the thing upstairs had started down the steps. Not fast. Patient. The key fit the disguised door beside the pantry. The moment I turned it, rain blew into the kitchen from nowhere. The hidden door opened into the Whitcombs' backyard, though it should have opened into the wall. I saw Mrs. Rusk standing under the porch light next door, one hand raised. I ran across the grass with Elsie against my chest. Behind me, Leah Whitcomb's house was completely dark except for one upstairs window. A small hand pressed against the glass. Not Elsie's. Not Jonah's either. Too many fingers. Mrs. Rusk took us inside and locked 7 locks behind us. She made Elsie sit on the sofa and gave me a towel that smelled like cedar chips. "They bring families here," she said, not looking at me. "People who lost children. People who left doors open. It feeds on the shape guilt makes." "Where are her parents?" Mrs. Rusk closed her eyes. "They'll say they were at dinner. They'll say you imagined things. They always do." The police came at 10:31. Leah and Daniel arrived 15 minutes later, soaked and pale, claiming they had rushed home after my strange messages. Elsie ran to Leah, crying, and Leah held her like a mother should. For a moment, I almost doubted everything. Then Daniel saw the baby monitor in my hands. His polite face emptied. "That isn't ours," he said. The officer asked where I got it. Before I could answer, the monitor produced one final burst of static. A child breathed into the speaker. Doors open. Every adult in the room heard it. The police searched the Whitcomb house until dawn. They found no hidden room beside the pantry. No extra hallway. No muddy footprints. No explanation for why the kitchen door opened into a wall when, from the outside, there was no door there at all. But they found one thing in Elsie's room. Behind the dresser, scratched into the baseboard, were the initials of 8 children. The last set was J. I left Cedar Run 3 weeks later. I stopped babysitting. I sold my car, changed my number, and moved into a first-floor studio in Dayton above a laundromat. I told myself distance mattered. I told myself old houses had old tricks. I told myself Jonah was gone, and whatever spoke in his voice was only wearing the sound of him. For almost a year, nothing happened. Then last night, at 9:17, I found the orange moon sticker stuck to the inside of my bedroom window. The baby monitor was on my nightstand, hissing softly. And before the green light turned on, Jonah whispered, "Mara, you came back early." Story 2. At 8:17 p.m., the silver frame above the Harisa's piano showed me holding a birthday cake I had never touched. I stood in their hallway with my wet shoes still on, one hand wrapped around the strap of my backpack, staring at a photograph that had been normal 10 minutes earlier. In it, Mr. and Mrs. Harris were sitting at the dining room table with their son, Oliver, who had frosting on his chin and a paper crown bent over one ear. Behind him, slightly out of focus, was me. Same black sweater. Same cheap jeans with the split at the knee. Same damp hair from the rain. I was smiling. That bothered me most, because I knew exactly what my face looked like that night, and it was not smiling. My name is Mara Lyle. I was 24 then, living in Barlow Creek, Maine, working mornings at a pharmacy, and taking babysitting jobs through a neighborhood app whenever rent got too close. My mother had died that February after a long illness, the kind that leaves drawers full of unpaid bills and a silence in the apartment that feels rude to disturb. The Harris job looked easy. One child. 4 hours. Cash. A house on Maple Row, the old part of town where the street lights buzzed and the houses had porches wide enough for rocking chairs. Mrs. Harris opened the door before I knocked. She was pale and tidy, with a pearl clip holding back her hair, and she spoke in the soft voice people use in museums. "Mara," she said, like she had been practicing it. "You found us." Behind her, the house smelled like lemon polish and something sweet burning at the edges. A hallway ran straight back to a kitchen lit in yellow. On the left wall were family photos in mismatched frames. Weddings, beach trips, school portraits, Christmas mornings. The largest one was the silver frame above the upright piano. Oliver was 6, small for his age, with dark hair combed too neatly and socks pulled almost to his knees. He sat at the bottom of the stairs holding a red plastic dinosaur with one missing leg. "Say hello," Mrs. Harris told him. Oliver looked at me for 3 seconds too long. "You came back," he said. Mrs. Harris gave a tiny laugh. "He says odd things when he's tired." Mr. Harris came down a minute later wearing a gray coat and smelling faintly of aftershave. He handed me 2 20s folded once. "Emergency numbers are on the fridge," he said. "No screen time after 8. He's already eaten. Bed at 9. And don't worry about the pictures," Mrs. Harris added from the doorway. I looked at her. "The frames are old," she said. "The glass catches reflections strangely at night." That was the first thing I explained away before anything had even happened. They left at 7:42, their car rolling quietly down the slick driveway. Oliver and I built a lopsided zoo out of wooden blocks in the living room. Rain ticked on the windows. The house made ordinary noises, pipes knocking, the refrigerator starting, a branch tapping the glass near the back door. At 8:05, Oliver asked for water. I followed him into the kitchen, and as we passed the hall, I noticed one of the photos had changed. Not completely, just enough to make me stop. A beach picture near the coat closet had shown the Harisas standing in front of the ocean when I arrived. Mrs. Harris in a white sun hat, Mr. Harris holding a cooler, Oliver kneeling with a plastic shovel. Now the shovel was gone. Oliver's hands were buried in the sand up to his wrists, and there was a dark shape behind the dunes, like someone standing far back with a coat over their head. I leaned closer. The glass reflected my own face, stretched and pale. "Old printer ink," I muttered. Oliver stood in the kitchen doorway with his cup. "You're not supposed to count them," he said. "Count what?" "The pictures." I tried to smile. "I wasn't counting." He nodded, but not like he believed me. By 8:30, he was in pajamas. He asked me to read from a book about trains, but he kept looking over my shoulder toward the hall. Every time the house settled, his fingers tightened on the blanket. At 8:49, while I was tucking him in, he whispered, "If one of them has your back in it, don't turn around." I froze with the edge of the blanket in my hand. What does that mean? He rolled onto his side, facing the wall. Mom says I say too much when I'm sleepy. Oliver. He pulled the blanket up to his chin. Don't look after 9. That was the warning. It should have been enough. But I had $40 in my pocket, a phone at 31%, and a head full of bills. Also, people say strange things. Kids especially. Houses at night make adults stupid with imagination. So at 9:03, when the hallway clock chimed once, I looked. The silver frame above the piano no longer showed Oliver's birthday. It showed the hallway. Not a hallway from years ago. This hallway. The narrow runner rug. The umbrella stand. My backpack on the floor where I had dropped it. The photo was taken from the living room, facing the stairs. In the picture, Oliver stood on the landing in his blue pajamas. And behind him, half hidden by the banister, stood me. My body understood before my brain did. I heard my own breathing, too loud in my ears. The picture showed me upstairs, but I was downstairs with both feet planted on the rug. Then a floorboard creaked above me. I looked up. Nothing moved on the landing. I called Oliver's name softly. No answer. The house seemed to hold the silence in its mouth. I took my phone out and tried Mrs. Harris. Straight to voicemail. Mr. Harris too. The emergency number on the fridge belonged to someone named Lenora Klein. I called it with my thumb shaking on the screen. A woman answered on the third ring. Harris House, she said. Yes, hi, I'm babysitting Oliver. I think there's something wrong with the photos. There was a pause. In the background, I heard a television turned low. What time is it? She asked. Just after 9. Her voice changed. Not louder. Smaller. Put the silver one face down. What? Do it before it sees the stairs. The line clicked. I stared at the phone. 1% disappeared from the battery, as if the call had drained more than power. I went to the piano. The silver frame was heavier than it looked. The metal felt warm, not like it had been near a vent, but like it had been held under someone's arm. There was a tiny engraving along the bottom edge I hadn't noticed before. Lyle, 1998. My last name. For a few seconds, I could only read it again and again, waiting for the letters to become something else. Lyle. My mother had always told me she moved to Barlow Creek after I was born. She had no family there, no old friends. Whenever I asked why she stayed, she said cheap rent and bad luck. Behind me, a door opened upstairs. Not a loud sound, just the soft release of a latch. I set the frame face down on the piano bench. Every photo on the hallway wall made a clicking sound at once. Small, dry, like teeth. Oliver called from upstairs, Mara? I grabbed my backpack and went up because leaving a child in that house felt worse than being afraid of it. His bedroom door was open. His bed was empty. A strip of light came from a door at the end of the hall that had been closed before. Inside was a narrow room, half storage, half nursery, with striped wallpaper peeling at the seams. Boxes were stacked under a slanted ceiling. A baby mobile hung above an old crib, its little cloth birds turning in air I couldn't feel. Oliver stood beside a cardboard box. I told you not to count, he said. I'm taking you downstairs. He pointed into the box. There were photographs inside, hundreds of them, loose, curled, yellowed. I saw the Harises at picnics, birthdays, church steps, school plays. Then I saw my mother. Not sick, not thin, young, maybe 22. She stood on the Harris porch with one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Her hair was longer than I remembered, her smile cautious. On the back of the photo, written in her handwriting, were 4 words. They said she belongs upstairs. I sat back on my heels. The nursery smelled suddenly of dust and baby powder. Beneath the photos was a hospital bracelet, brittle with age, the plastic browned. The name printed on it was mine. Mara Lyle. Date of birth, April 11th, 1998. My mother hadn't moved to Barlow Creek after I was born. She had run from this house with me. Downstairs, the piano played one note. Oliver covered his ears. They know, he whispered. The photos in the box began to change. Not all at once. One here, one there. My mother's face turning toward the camera. A hand appearing on her shoulder. The Harris porch darkening behind her until the windows looked black. Then one photo near my knee showed the nursery we were sitting in. In it, I was kneeling over the box. Oliver stood beside me. And in the doorway behind us, Mrs. Harris smiled. I turned. The doorway was empty. A car door closed outside. I grabbed Oliver's wrist and pulled him with me. He didn't fight. We ran down the stairs too fast, my socks slipping on the polished wood. The silver frame was no longer face down on the piano bench. It hung on the wall again. This time, it showed the front door from the outside. Me opening it, Oliver standing behind me. Mrs. Harris, close enough to touch my shoulder. The real front door unlocked when I twisted the knob. Cold rain blew in. I shoved Oliver onto the porch and followed. The Harris car sat in the driveway with its headlights off. Mr. Harris stood beside it, holding an umbrella. Mrs. Harris was on the porch steps, smiling gently, as if I had forgotten a coat. "Mara," she said, "you found the old things. Stay away from us." She looked past me at Oliver. "He has to come in. He isn't finished." Oliver pressed against my side. Mr. Harris took one step forward. I did the only thing that made sense. I picked up the nearest object, a wet clay planter from the porch rail, and threw it at the hallway window. The glass cracked. Not shattered. Cracked. Inside the house, every picture frame split down the middle. Mrs. Harris made a sound like she had inhaled water. Mr. Harris turned toward the window, and for 1 second neither of them was looking at us. I ran. Oliver's hand kept slipping in mine, but he kept up. We cut across the lawn, through a hedge, into the neighbor's yard. A motion light snapped on. A dog started barking. I banged on the back door until an old man in a bathrobe opened it with a baseball bat in his hands. I told him to call the police. When I looked back through his kitchen window, the Harris house was dark. No porch light. No car. No broken window. Just rain on the empty driveway. The police found no one inside. No Harises. No Oliver. No nursery. The house had been vacant for 9 years, owned by a bank that couldn't sell it because buyers kept backing out. They said I had probably been scammed. Drugged, maybe. Exhausted. Grief can do strange things, one officer told me, like that was a kind thing to say. But they couldn't explain the mud on the neighbor's floor from Oliver's socks. They couldn't explain the hospital bracelet in my backpack. And they definitely couldn't explain the silver frame. I did not take it. I know I didn't. I remember dropping my backpack in the neighbor's kitchen. I remember the old man making tea with a shaking hand. I remember the police asking me the same questions until the sky turned gray. Still, when I got home the next morning, the silver frame was on my kitchen table. The glass was cracked from corner to corner. The metal had gone cold. Inside was a photograph of my mother holding me as a baby on the porch of the Harris house. She looked terrified. Behind her, in the upstairs window, Oliver watched us. I threw the frame in a dumpster behind the pharmacy before my shift. Then I moved apartments. Then I left Barlow Creek entirely. That was 3 years ago. I live 2 states away now. I don't babysit. I don't keep photographs on my walls. My phone has no pictures of my face, not even in the cloud, as far as I can tell. Last week, a padded envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a small silver nail, the kind used to hang a frame. There was a note wrapped around it in my mother's handwriting, though she has been dead for years. It only said, "Don't count the new ones." Tonight, at 8:17, I found a fresh photograph taped inside my closet door. It shows my apartment hallway. It shows me reading this. And behind me, just out of focus, Oliver is holding the silver frame. Story 3. The baby monitor on the kitchen counter said my sister's nickname in a man's voice, while Jonah Harrow was still upstairs brushing his teeth. "Rue," it whispered through the plastic speaker. Not Leah. Not my sister's real name. Rue. I hadn't heard anyone say it in 15 years. The monitor was one of those old video ones with a cloudy gray screen and a bendable antenna, the kind parents keep even though the sound crackles and the picture rolls. It sat beside a bowl of green apples in the Harrow's kitchen, plugged into nothing. I noticed that part right away because the cord was wrapped around it like somebody had packed it away and then changed their mind. The screen showed static, then a hallway, then static again. I was 24 then, living in a rented room behind a laundromat in Westlake, Ohio, taking night babysitting jobs while I studied for my EMT certification. My mother had been sick for almost a year, and every bill arrived with red ink and a due date. That was why I accepted the Harrow job, even though it paid too much, and Mrs. Harrow sounded too relieved when I said I could stay late. Their house was on Morrow Lane, in a neighborhood where every lawn looked combed. White siding, black shutters, porch swing, pumpkins on the steps even though Halloween was still 3 weeks away. Nothing looked wrong except the upstairs window above the garage. It had a child's palm print on the inside of the glass. Mrs. Harrow saw me looking at it and gave a little laugh. "Jonah likes to watch for the mail truck," she said. Her husband, Paul, stood behind her in a charcoal coat with the collar turned up. He had a soft voice and wet-looking eyes. He gave me $40 in advance and said they would be back by midnight. "Probably earlier," he added. Mrs. Harrow handed me a list written in neat blue ink. Dinner at 7:15, bath at 8 o'clock, no TV after 8:30, bedtime at 9 o'clock. At the bottom, underlined twice, it said, "Do not let him play with the monitor." I thought that was strange, but parents had strange rules. I had worked for families who labeled every drawer, and one who made me text a photo of the child's dinner plate after he ate. Jonah was 7, small for his age, with round glasses and hair cut too straight across his forehead. He looked at me the way adults look at a locked door they're trying to remember the key for. "You're Mara," he said. "Your mom told you?" "No," he said. "The kitchen did." I smiled because that is what you do when a kid says something creepy in a normal house. Dinner was chicken nuggets and sliced pears. Jonah ate exactly 3 nuggets and lined the pears along the edge of his plate like teeth. Halfway through, he said, "You don't like pears because your sister choked on one when she was little." My fork stopped above my napkin. Leah had not choked. She had laughed so hard at the kitchen table that a piece of pear got stuck, and my dad had slapped her back until it came out. It became one of those family stories that got told until it turned soft at the edges. But nobody outside our family knew it. "Who told you that?" I asked. Jonah kept arranging the fruit. She did. I looked toward the counter. The baby monitor screen had gone black. "She who?" Jonah picked up the smallest pear slice and put it in his mouth. "Rue." For a minute, I could hear everything in that kitchen too clearly. The refrigerator clicking on. The rain tapping against the back door. Jonah chewing. I told myself Mrs. Harrow must have looked me up. Maybe she had found an old local article. Leah's disappearance had been in the papers when I was 9. Missing girl, cold February night, little sister asleep in the next room. There were photographs of us online if you searched long enough. But Rue wasn't in any article. That nickname was ours. Leah hated it once she got older, so we only used it at home. At 8:37, Jonah was in the bath, and someone knocked on the kitchen window. Not the front door. The kitchen window over the sink. I pulled back the curtain and saw an old woman standing in the rain under a yellow umbrella. She was tiny, wrapped in a plastic rain bonnet, one hand pressed flat against the glass. I opened the back door only a few inches. "Are you the sitter?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Mrs. Vale from next door." She looked past me into the house. "They gone? For dinner, I think." Her mouth moved like she was deciding how much trouble a sentence was worth. "Do they still have that monitor?" The hallway behind me crackled. I did not turn around. "It's on the counter," I said. Mrs. Vale's face changed. "You get your money first?" "What?" "Never mind. Listen." Rain dripped from the edge of her umbrella in a steady line. "If the porch light goes out before midnight, you walk out the front door and don't come back for your coat." "What's wrong with the porch light?" She looked toward the ceiling, where Jonah was humming in the tub. "That's all I can say." "Mrs. Vale, has something happened here?" She stepped back off the stoop. "Ask about Clara if you want to be lied to." Then she crossed the yard quickly for someone her age, umbrella bobbing between the hedges. I locked the door and stood there with my hand on the deadbolt. The baby monitor made a soft clicking sound behind me. Once, twice, 3 times. On the screen, through rolling static, I saw the upstairs hallway. Jonah was not in the hallway. He was still in the bathroom. I could hear water splashing above me. But a girl stood outside his bedroom door. She was turned away from the camera, wearing a red sweater and jeans, her dark hair tied in a braid. Leah used to wear her hair like that. I blinked, and the screen went black. That was when I should have left. I know that now. But my purse was on the hall table, my car keys were inside it, and Jonah was 7 years old in a bathtub. I wasn't going to run out into the rain and leave him because an old monitor was showing interference. So I did the reasonable thing. I unplugged the monitor. The screen stayed on. Upstairs, Jonah stopped humming. When I got to the bathroom, he was sitting in the drained tub with a towel around his shoulders. He looked past me at the hallway. "You turned it angry," he said. "It's just an old monitor." "No," Jonah said. "It's how they check if the babysitter is the right one." My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Who's they?" He put one wet finger to his lips. From downstairs came the faint sound of a woman laughing. Not Mrs. Harrow. Not me. A young woman. I got Jonah into pajamas and moved fast without looking like I was moving fast. His room smelled like crayons and dust. The walls were covered in drawings, mostly houses with tall black windows. One picture above his bed showed a stick-figure girl holding a square object with an antenna. Under the drawing, in a child's block letters, was written, "Clara brought it first." I pointed to the name. "Who's Clara?" Jonah climbed under his blanket. "The other babysitter. Where is she now?" He looked at the alarm clock on his nightstand. 9:12. She stayed. I kept my hand on the doorframe. Stayed where? In the quiet part. The house made a settling noise around us, long and low, like wood bending under weight. I checked every room upstairs after Jonah pretended to sleep. The Harrows' bedroom was neat enough to look unused. Their closet had no dirty laundry, no shoes tossed on the floor, no smell of perfume or skin or life. Just rows of clothes hung by color. In the guest room, I found a stack of folded sheets and a cardboard file box under the bed. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe Mrs. Vale's warning had already given me permission to be rude. Maybe hearing Rue had changed something in me, pulled loose the old part that had never stopped searching. The box was full of folders. Each folder had a name. Clara Denton, Nina Price, Beth Alvarado, Mara Holt. My folder was thin. Inside was a printed copy of my babysitting profile, a photo from my EMT class fundraiser, and an old newspaper clipping with my school picture beside Leah's. Under the clipping was a yellowed hospital bracelet. Not mine, Leah's. I knew because my mother had kept it in a shoebox after Leah broke her wrist falling off her bike. Years later, after Leah disappeared, Mom would take that bracelet out and hold it like a rosary. It had gone missing from our apartment the week before the Harrows called me. I backed out of the room holding the bracelet, so tightly the plastic edges cut half moons into my palm. The baby monitor was waiting at the top of the stairs. I had left it in the kitchen. Its screen glowed gray. The cord still wrapped around it. From the speaker came Jonah's voice, even though his bedroom door was closed behind me. "You should leave before midnight," it said. That's when the other babysitter disappeared. Then Jonah's real voice whispered from his room, "Mara?" I opened his door. He was sitting straight up in bed, eyes wide behind his glasses. "Don't answer it when it sounds like me," he said. Downstairs, the porch light went out. The whole house seemed to inhale. I grabbed Jonah's hand and pulled him from the bed. He didn't fight me. His fingers were cold and damp. We made it halfway down the stairs before the front door opened by itself. Rain blew in across the entryway. My purse sat on the hall table, exactly where I had left it, but my keys were lined up beside it in a neat row. House key, car key, little brass key to my mother's apartment, and one key I had never seen before. It was old and black, tied with a red thread. Jonah made a small sound. "That one is for the quiet part," he whispered. Behind us, from the upstairs hallway, a girl said, "Mara, don't leave me twice." Leah's voice. Not a recording, not a memory. Her voice at 16, annoyed and tired and alive. The same voice that had called my name the night she vanished. That was the part one never told the police. I said I slept through everything. I said I didn't hear the back door. But I had. I heard Leah call me from the kitchen, and I stayed in bed because I was angry at her. She had yelled at me earlier for using her CD player. I thought she wanted me to get up and apologize. Then something else said my name too from under the floor. I covered my ears and stared at the open front door. Jonah tugged my sleeve. "It knows what you left behind," he said. "That's how it gets the right babysitter." "What is it?" He shook his head hard. The monitor clicked from the top of the stairs. Once, twice, 3 times. A shadow moved across the foyer wall, shaped like a person carrying a square object against their chest. The screen flashed white, and for 1 second I saw not the Harrows' hallway, but my childhood kitchen. Yellow curtains, linoleum floor, Leah's red sweater hanging on a chair. Then the girl at the top of the stairs stepped into view. She had Leah's braid, Leah's sweater, Leah's narrow shoulders. But her face was turned slightly wrong, like it had been remembered by someone who had only seen photographs. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the hospital bracelet at her. The bracelet hit the stairs and slid down one step. The thing wearing Leah's shape bent toward it. Jonah screamed, "Now." I grabbed my purse, snatched the car key, and ran with him through the open front door. The rain was freezing. The porch boards were slick. Mrs. Vale's house next door had every light on, but no one came out. Behind us, the monitor's static grew louder until it sounded like applause. Jonah stopped at the edge of the porch steps. "I can't go farther," he said. "What do you mean?" He looked smaller than any child I had ever seen. "I'm already there." The front door slammed behind him. I was standing alone in the rain. No Jonah. No light in the house. No sound except water running through the gutters. I drove straight to the police station, shaking so badly I had to use both hands to put the car in park. 2 officers went back with me. The house on Morrow Lane was empty. Not empty like the Harrows had left for the night. Empty like no one had lived there in years. Dust on the counters. No apples. No children's drawings. No file box. No baby monitor. The upstairs window was cracked, and on the inside of the glass was a palm print too small to belong to an adult. The police found one thing in the entryway, a red thread. They told me the property had been tied up in court since 1998, when a babysitter named Clara Denton disappeared from that address during a storm. The Harrows had owned it then. Paul and June Harrow died in a car accident 3 months later. They never had a son. I moved 2 counties over after that. I changed my number. I stopped babysitting. My mother passed in December, and when I cleaned out her apartment, I found the shoebox where she kept Leah's things. The hospital bracelet was back inside. So was a photograph I had never seen before. It showed me at 9 years old, sitting on our old kitchen floor. Leah stood behind me with one hand on my shoulder. In the corner of the picture, barely visible on the counter, was the baby monitor with the cloudy gray screen. There was writing on the back in blue ink. "Mara left early." I burned the photo in the sink. For almost a year, nothing happened. Then last night, at 11:57, I came home from my shift and found a green apple sitting on my kitchen counter. Beside it was the monitor. Its cord was wrapped around it like a noose, and the screen was already glowing. At midnight, Jonah's voice came through the speaker, calm and close. "You came back early. Story 4. At 9:17 p.m., the brass key in my coat pocket clicked inside the basement lock from across the hallway. I was standing in the kitchen when it happened, rinsing a pink plastic cup shaped like a rabbit, and the sound was so clean and close that I turned with the water still running over my fingers. One sharp metallic click, then another, like someone on the other side of the basement door was patiently trying every tooth of the key. The strange part was that the key was with me. I could feel its weight against my thigh. My name is Claire Doran. I was 28 then, living in northern Vermont, outside a small town called Bellwether, doing whatever work kept the lights on. I cleaned vacation cabins in the mornings, delivered prescriptions 3 evenings a week, and sometimes took overnight babysitting jobs through a local agency. That winter, I was behind on rent and still sorting through boxes from my mother's apartment. She had passed in October, and I had not been handling it well. I kept telling people I was fine because that was easier than saying I had started sleeping with the TV on and avoiding every mirror in my apartment. The brass key came from her things. I found it in a sewing tin under a pile of blue buttons. It was old, heavy, and warm-looking, with a red thread tied through the bow. No label. No lock it belonged to. I kept it in my coat pocket because I didn't know what else to do with it. The Vale family lived at the end of Rusk Road, where the map turned gray and the trees crowded close enough to scrape both sides of a car. Their house looked normal at first. White siding, yellow porch light, a little bird feeder swinging from a chain. The only wrong detail was the basement door. It sat at the end of the main hall, painted a flat dark green, with 3 locks stacked above the handle. Not shiny new locks. Old ones. The kind you could picture on a church chest or a courthouse file room. Around the frame, someone had nailed thin strips of copper into the wood, and every nail head had been painted over. Marin Vale met me at the door wearing rain boots even though there wasn't rain. Her husband, Elias, stood behind her holding a car key and watching the hall instead of me. Their daughter, Tessa, was 7. She had dark hair cut straight across her forehead and a calmness that made her seem older when she was sitting still. She introduced herself by handing me a drawing of the house. Every window was colored yellow. The basement door was colored black. Marin gave me the usual instructions: dinner in the fridge, no soda after 8, Tessa's inhaler in the bathroom cabinet. Then her voice changed. Don't open the basement door. I almost smiled, thinking it was a safety thing. Old houses had bad stairs, mold, exposed wiring. I won't, I said. Elias stepped closer. No matter what she says. Tessa looked up from the carpet. Marin touched her husband's arm lightly, like that was enough. She has vivid dreams, Marin said. Sometimes she talks in her sleep. Sometimes she asks people to do things. Don't argue with her. Just keep her upstairs. I looked back at the green door. There was a thin rug pushed against the bottom, the kind people use to block drafts. It didn't move, but the air around it looked colder somehow, like the floorboards there belonged to a different season. Is the basement unfinished? I asked. Elias answered too quickly. It's locked. That was not an answer, but I needed the money. They left at 6:41 p.m. Marin kissed Tessa twice on the head. Elias paused by the basement door, touched the top lock with 2 fingers, then followed his wife outside. For the first hour, nothing happened. Tessa ate macaroni and peas without complaining. She asked if I had a mother. I said I used to. She nodded like I had answered correctly. At 7:38, while I loaded the dishwasher, she said, "Your key doesn't know you yet." I turned. "What key?" She pointed to my coat hanging on the chair. The brass key was in the right pocket. I had not taken it out. I had not mentioned it. I told myself she must have seen the red thread sticking out when I arrived. Kids notice everything. That was all. Then she said, "You should put it under your tongue if it starts talking." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Tessa did not laugh with me. At 8:12, I found her in the hallway sitting cross-legged facing the basement door. Her hands were folded in her lap, very proper, like she was waiting outside a principal's office. "Tessa," I said, "your mom said upstairs." She's not my mom when the door is awake. The house went so quiet after she said that, I could hear the kitchen clock clicking from 2 rooms away. I walked her back to the living room and put on a cartoon. She watched without blinking. I checked the locks on the basement door. All 3 were still shut. The copper strips around the frame had tiny scratches in them, dozens of them, all at child height. That was the second thing I explained away badly. Maybe a dog had done it. Maybe the Vallas used to have a cat. Maybe Tessa scratched at the door during tantrums. At 8:47, someone knocked from below. 3 soft taps. Not from the other side of the door. From under the floorboards beneath my feet. Tessa paused her cartoon. I didn't move. She looked at me over the back of the couch and whispered, "Don't answer unless it uses your whole name." I called Marin. No answer. I called Elias. Straight to voicemail. The agency number played a recording saying the office closed at 5. I stood there holding my phone with 31% battery, feeling ridiculous and trapped by the fact that every reasonable explanation required me to ignore something I had heard with my own ears. Then the landline rang. It was mounted on the kitchen wall, yellowed plastic with a curly cord. I hadn't noticed it before. It rang once, twice, then stopped. A second later, it rang again. I picked it up. There was no static, no breathing, just a woman's voice, low and tired. "Claire Bear?" Nobody called me that except my mother. I hung up so hard the receiver cracked against the cradle. Tessa appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was good at voices, she said, before she forgot which one was hers. I grabbed my coat and told Tessa we were going to wait on the porch until her parents came home. She didn't argue. That scared me more than if she had screamed. The front door would not open. The deadbolt turned halfway, then stopped. I tried again. Nothing. The back door was the same. The windows had old storm latches that looked simple until I realized someone had screwed them shut from the outside. That was when I found the binder. It was in the pantry beside the fire extinguisher, labeled emergency in Marin's neat handwriting. I expected numbers, insurance cards, maybe Tessa's medical information. The first page said, If the sitter has a key, do not leave the house. Under that, in smaller writing, if the sitter is named Doran, call Father Kells before sunset. My mouth went dry, but I kept turning pages because panic was not useful yet. There were printed photos. Different women standing awkwardly in the Vale hallway, each one holding a child or a bag or a set of keys. Beside every photo was a date and one word written in red ink. Returned. Refused. Kept. On the last page, paper clipped to the plastic sleeve, was an old newspaper clipping from 1999. The photograph was grainy, but I recognized the face anyway because I had packed that face into cardboard boxes for 3 months. My mother at 16. The headline read, "Local girl found after 3 days near Rusk Road property." Below the clipping, someone had written, "She promised to bring the daughter back." I sat down on the pantry floor without meaning to. My mother had never talked about Bellwether. She said she grew up near Burlington. She said her childhood was boring. She said a lot of things that now felt less like lies and more like locks. From the hallway came the sound of metal turning. One click, then another. The brass key in my coat pocket twitched against my leg. I pulled it out. It was warm, almost hot, and the red thread had come undone. Down the hall, the top lock on the basement door rotated by itself. Tessa stood beside it, one hand flat on the green paint. "Don't," I said. She looked at me with a kind of pity that no child should know how to wear. "It wants to meet you." The middle lock opened. Behind the door, something shifted on the stairs. Not footsteps exactly, more like a chair being dragged very slowly across a wooden floor. "Tessa, come here. She said you'd be taller." "Who said?" Tessa smiled. The last lock turned. The basement door opened an inch. Cold air slid into the hallway. It smelled like wet cement, candle wax, and my mother's old perfume, the cheap lilac kind she wore to job interviews. From the dark came her voice again. "Claire, don't stand there being rude." I backed away. The door opened wider. There were stairs behind it, but not basement stairs. Not normal ones. They were painted white and lit by a yellow lamp hanging somewhere far below. On the third step sat a pair of women's shoes, brown leather, cracked at the toes. My mother's shoes. I knew them because I had thrown them out after the funeral. Tessa took one step down. I grabbed her wrist. The moment I touched her, the hallway light burst. Glass ticked across the floor. Tessa did not flinch. She simply turned her head toward the dark below and said, "She's holding me." Something pulled back. Not hard enough to yank Tessa away. Just enough to let me know it could. I wrapped both arms around her and dragged her into the kitchen. She was light, too light, like carrying a coat full of sticks. The basement door stayed open behind us. The landline rang again. Then my cell phone lit up. MOM. I had deleted her contact weeks ago because seeing it hurt too much. The phone kept buzzing in my hand. I answered because grief makes idiots of people. For a second, there was only the sound of wind. Then my mother whispered, "I left first." "What?" "I left first. That was the rule." "I'm sorry." A scraping sound came from the hallway. The basement door was opening wider, though it had already opened as far as the wall allowed. The wood bent. The copper strips popped one by one from the frame. Tessa's calm finally broke. She covered her ears and began saying, "Not tonight, not tonight, not tonight," in a small, steady voice. That helped me move. I threw one of the kitchen chairs through the window above the sink. The first hit cracked it. The second broke enough glass for the winter air to rush in. I wrapped Tessa in my coat and pushed her through onto the porch roof outside the kitchen. She did not want to go. She looked past me and said, "It knows your birthday." I climbed after her with glass biting through my sleeve and got us down onto the muddy side yard. The house behind us was dark except for the basement doorway, glowing yellow from inside like an open mouth. Elias and Marin's car was gone. Mine was still in the driveway. I drove with Tessa in the passenger seat, barefoot and silent, until we reached the gas station on Route 6. I called the police from there because my phone had died at exactly 9:32. When the sheriff arrived, Tessa was no longer in my car. The passenger seat was damp. My coat was folded neatly where she had been sitting. In the pocket was the brass key, cold again, with the red thread tied in a perfect bow. The sheriff drove me back to the house. I did not want to go, but I also knew how insane my story sounded without a child, without witnesses, without proof. The house on Rusk Road was empty. No furniture, no dishes, no pink rabbit cup in the sink. The basement door was there, but it had no locks on it, no copper strips, no scratches. Just a plain green door painted shut along the edges. The sheriff pried it open. Behind it was a brick wall. Not old brick either. Newer, red, still dusty around the mortar. He asked me if I had taken anything that night. I said no. That was almost true. I moved 2 towns over in March. I stopped cleaning cabins. I found work filing records for a dentist, quiet work with fluorescent lights and no basements. For a while, I convinced myself the Valles were criminals, or I had been drugged, or grief had turned an ordinary house into something else in my head. Then last week, a padded envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was Tessa's drawing of the house. Every window was colored yellow. The basement door was colored black. And beside it, in my mother's handwriting, someone had written, "You came back early." I took the brass key to the police station that same day and handed it over. I watched the clerk seal it in an evidence bag. I watched him write the number on the label. I watched him drop it into a locked drawer. Tonight, at 9:17, I heard the key click inside my apartment door. Story 5. At 8:17 p.m., the baby monitor on the kitchen counter whispered Mr. Ellery's voice while his reflection stood behind me in the black microwave door. The reflection smiled. The kitchen itself was empty. I had been babysitting for almost 6 years by then, long enough to know the difference between a weird house and a dangerous one. Weird houses had old pipes, bad lighting, parents who forgot to mention the dog-hated strangers. Dangerous houses made the air feel staged, like everything had been arranged before you arrived and was waiting for you to notice. The Ellery house was on Briar Glen Road, just outside Mill Creek, Pennsylvania, where the trees grow so close to the road that headlights look like they're pushing through a tunnel. I was 22, finishing online classes for medical billing, and taking any cash job I could because my mother's hospice bills had followed me even after her funeral. My name is Lena Ward. I lived alone then in a basement studio under a nail salon, and I told myself every bad decision was temporary. The Ellerys paid $200 for one evening. That was enough to make me ignore the mirrors. There were mirrors everywhere in that house. A tall oval one in the entryway. A smoky antique one above the fireplace. Square mirrored tiles behind the dining room bar. Even the hallway had narrow strips of mirror set between the framed family photos, so walking through it felt like passing pieces of yourself. Mrs. Ellery saw me looking. "Old owner had a thing for them," she said, fastening one pearl earring in the hallway mirror. Her husband, Daniel Ellery, stood near the front door in a navy coat, smiling the kind of smile adults use when they want a younger person to feel comfortable fast. Their son, Milo, was 7. Small for his age, blonde, quiet, with one of those serious faces that made him look like he was listening to something in another room. "He's asleep already," Mrs. Ellery said. "Fever broke this afternoon. Just check on him every half hour." She put a brass key on the counter. It had a red plastic tag, the cheap kind landlords use, but the writing on it was strange. "Back wall." I almost asked about it. Mr. Ellery spoke first. "In case the old latch sticks." "What latch?" I asked. "The house settles," he said. That was his whole answer. They left at 7:42 for dinner at a place called Marrow and Thyme downtown. I watched their car roll down the wet driveway, taillights bending red across the puddles. The porch light flickered once after they turned onto the road. Then the house went very still. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. I made tea I didn't drink. I checked Milo's room. He was asleep under a dinosaur blanket, one hand open on the pillow. A little silver baby monitor sat on his dresser, even though he was old enough not to need one. Its matching receiver was in the kitchen, beside the brass key. At 8:17, the receiver clicked. A man breathed through the speaker. Then Mr. Ellery's voice said, very softly, "She's in the kitchen." I looked up at the microwave door. His reflection stood behind me, clear from the shoulders up, wearing the navy coat he had left in. I turned so fast my hip hit the counter. No one was there. The microwave door showed only the cabinets, the rain-dark window, and me with one hand gripping a mug. I told myself the baby monitor had picked up a neighbor's device. That happens sometimes. Cheap monitors crossed signals. I had read about it. Then the hallway mirror creaked. Not cracked, not shifted. Creaked, like weight had leaned against the other side. I picked up my phone and called Mrs. Ellery. Her contact was saved as Clara Ellery, because she had texted me the address earlier with too many smiley faces and a reminder not to park under the walnut tree. The call rang once in my ear. Then from somewhere behind the kitchen wall, her ringtone began playing. It was muffled, tinny, and close. I lowered my phone. The ringtone kept going inside the wall behind the refrigerator. I hung up. The wall went silent. I stood there counting the magnets on the fridge. School calendar. Dentist reminder. A photo booth strip of the Elleries smiling with Milo between them. A receipt held under a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Marrow and time. Reservation for 2. Cancelled. Date printed at the bottom. October 14th, 2019. 7 years earlier. I should have left then. I know that. People always think survival is one big brave choice, but sometimes it's a dozen stupid little delays. My purse was in the living room. My charger was plugged behind the couch. My car keys were in the ceramic bowl by the front door. And Milo was upstairs with a fever. I walked into the living room. In the fireplace mirror, Mrs. Ellery stood at the bottom of the stairs. Not in the room, only in the mirror. She was still wearing her black dress and pearl earrings. Her head was turned toward Milo's room. "Don't," I whispered, though I don't know who I meant it for. The baby monitor clicked again from the kitchen. This time it was Milo's voice. "Lena?" I ran upstairs. His room smelled like children's medicine and warm sheets. Milo was sitting up, eyes open, dinosaur blanket pulled to his chin. "How do you know my name?" I asked. He pointed behind me. Not to the door, to the little mirror over his dresser. In it, Mr. and Mrs. Ellery stood side by side in the hallway outside Milo's room. When I looked at the real hallway, it was empty. Milo said, "They said you came back early." The floorboards downstairs popped one by one, moving from the kitchen toward the stairs. I shut Milo's door and locked it. "There's no lock," he said. I looked down. He was right. My hand was wrapped around a smooth brass knob with no lock at all. Something tapped on the other side of the door. 3 polite knocks. Then Mrs. Ellery's voice said, "Lena, sweetheart, you forgot the key." Milo started crying without making sound. I pulled him from the bed and carried him to the far corner. His skin felt too cold for a child who had supposedly had a fever. My phone had 1 bar. I dialed 911. The call failed. A second later, every wall in the room began ringing. Not one phone. Many. Different tones vibrating behind plaster, under the floor, inside the ceiling. Mrs. Ellery's cheerful ringtone. Mr. Ellery's low buzzing one. Old landline bells. A melody I recognized but couldn't place until I was already crying. My mother's ringtone. The one she had used before she died. I hadn't heard it in 14 months. Milo covered his ears. "They keep the phones," he said. "Where?" He pointed down. Behind the back wall. The brass key on the kitchen counter flashed in my mind. Red tag. Back wall. The knock stopped. A shadow moved across the gap under the door, but it didn't pass from left to right. It pressed there, flat and patient, as if someone were lying on the floor with their face against the crack. A woman outside whispered, "She still has her mother's eyes." That was when the night changed from strange to personal. My mother, Elise Ward, had cleaned houses before she got sick. She used to bring me along when I was little, parking me with coloring books in strange kitchens while she scrubbed ovens and folded sheets. I remembered almost none of the houses. Just smells. Lemon cleaner. Dust. Rain on wool coats. But I remembered one thing she told me near the end, when the morphine made her loose with old secrets. Never take work on Briar Glen. I thought she was confused. I thought she meant the hospice nurse named Brian. The room went silent all at once. Milo climbed out of my arms and crawled under his bed. "Where are you going?" I whispered. He reached up into the bed frame and pulled something free. A folded piece of yellow paper. He handed it to me. It was a child's drawing, old and soft at the creases. A house with too many windows. A woman with orange hair. A little girl beside her. 2 tall black shapes inside the walls. In purple crayon, across the bottom, someone had written, "Mommy says do not look when they stay home." The name in the corner was mine. Lena, age 5. I don't remember drawing it. I don't remember that house. But I knew my mother's handwriting on the back. If they ask you to sit, take the key and run. The hallway outside Milo's room filled with footsteps. Slow. 2 adults, walking in perfect time. I opened the window. The drop to the porch roof was steep but possible. Rain blew in, cold and sharp. Milo shook his head. They don't let me outside after dark. You're going outside tonight. They'll see me in the glass. I looked down at the porch roof. Rainwater sheeted over black shingles. My car sat beyond the yard under the walnut tree. Then the bedroom mirror went dark. Not like the lights had gone out. Like someone had painted the glass from behind. A hand appeared in the blackness and pressed outward. The mirror bulged without breaking. Milo whispered, "Don't let them finish." I grabbed him and climbed through the window. The porch roof was slick. My socks slid inside my shoes. I nearly dropped him reaching for the gutter. Behind us, his bedroom door opened. A calm male voice said, "We paid for the whole evening." I lowered Milo to the porch railing, then jumped into the bushes. Pain shot through my ankle, but it held. I dragged him across the yard. The front door opened behind us. Warm yellow light spilled onto the wet grass. Mr. and Mrs. Ellery stood in the doorway. Their real bodies were not solid right away. They shimmered at the edges, like reflections trying to remember the shape of people. Mrs. Ellery raised one hand, not waving, showing me my car keys. They were dangling from her finger. I still had the brass key in my hoodie pocket. I don't remember taking it from the kitchen, but there it was, red tag wet against my palm. Milo saw it and screamed, "Not that one." The ground under the walnut tree made a hollow sound. My car wasn't parked on gravel. It was parked on old boards hidden under leaves. The back wall wasn't inside the house. It was under the yard. I pulled up one board and found a narrow door set flat into the ground, swollen with rain, fitted with a brass latch. The key turned. A smell came up that I can still taste sometimes. Dust, wet wood, dead batteries, and perfume. Below was a crawl space, not a basement. The beam from my phone showed wires stapled along joists, hundreds of them, all leading toward the house. Phones hung from nails in the dirt walls. Cell phones, flip phones, cordless handsets, a cracked pink phone with glitter stickers, and one old white phone with my mother's name written on masking tape. E. Ward. It began to ring. The Elrys were halfway across the lawn now, moving too smoothly, their feet not quite matching the mud. I don't know why I answered it. Maybe because grief makes you stupid. Maybe because, for 1 second, I wanted my mother more than I wanted to live. I pressed the phone to my ear. My mother's voice came through, thin and far away. "Lena, leave the boy." I looked at Milo. He wasn't crying anymore. He was smiling. Behind him, in my car window, his reflection was not a child. It was Mr. Ellery, crouched small inside Milo's skin. The real Milo, if there had ever been one, was nowhere in that yard. The thing holding my hand said, in Milo's voice, "She always answers." I ran. Not to my car. Not to the road. I ran straight through the hedges into the neighbor's yard, tearing my arms on branches, my bad ankles sliding in mud. An old woman stood on her porch in a raincoat, holding a flashlight. She didn't look surprised. "Did you answer?" she called. I couldn't speak. Her face changed. "Oh, honey," she said. "Then they know where to send it." The police came 20 minutes later. They found the Ellery house locked and empty. No child. No parents. No dinner reservation. No phones in the walls. The officer who took my statement kept asking if I had taken something, because I had a brass key clenched so tightly in my fist it cut the skin. I moved 3 weeks later. New town. New number. New job at a billing office where nothing rang unless I wanted it to. For almost a year, I convinced myself the Elrys had been a family of squatters or a cult, or some kind of scam that my mind had twisted into ghosts because I was tired and grieving. Then last night, at 8:17, my apartment wall rang. I didn't answer. I sat on the floor until morning with every light on, watching the blank television across the room. Just before sunrise, the dark screen showed Mrs. Ellery standing behind me. She was holding up a red plastic tag. "Back wall." And from inside the plaster, my mother whispered, "Lena, sweetheart, you forgot the key." Story 6. At 8:47 p.m., the baby monitor on the Myers kitchen counter whispered my full name. even though the little boy was sitting beside me with a blue crayon in his fist. He didn't look up when it happened. He just kept drawing the house. Not the house the way it actually looked, either. The Real house was a pale yellow ranch at the end of Briar Lane, with black shutters, a sagging porch swing, and one of those plastic geese by the front steps dressed in a raincoat. The kind of house that looked harmless because every house on that street looked harmless. But the house in his drawing had 3 floors, no windows, and a crooked room sitting on the roof like it had been dropped there by accident. I was 26 then, living in a 1-bedroom apartment outside Dayton, working mornings as a preschool assistant, and taking babysitting jobs at night because my mother's medical bills hadn't disappeared just because she had. Her ashes were still in a cardboard box in my closet, next to a stack of letters from the hospital with red print on the envelopes. So when a woman named Marissa Myers messaged me through a neighborhood sitting app and offered $80 cash for one evening, I took it. The job seemed normal. Marissa met me at the door at 6:15 wearing a green cardigan and too much perfume, the sweet kind that tries to cover up another smell. Her husband, David, stood behind her holding car keys, smiling without showing his teeth. They said their son's name was Eli. He was 6. Quiet. Easy. Bedtime at 9. No allergies. No screen time after dinner. Eli doesn't like strangers, Marissa said, pressing folded bills into my hand before I even stepped inside. But he likes girls with soft voices. That was an odd thing to say, but I'd heard worse from nervous parents. Eli was in the living room when I walked in, sitting cross-legged on the rug, drawing with a single blue crayon. He had straight brown hair, a serious little face, and a gray sweatshirt with sleeves too long for his arms. He glanced at me once, then went back to coloring. "Hi, Eli," I said. He didn't answer. David handed me a baby monitor. It was old. Not a video monitor, just a beige plastic audio one with a cracked antenna and a strip of yellowing tape across the back. Someone had written "listen" in black marker on the tape. "We keep it in the kitchen," David said. "Sometimes the house settles." That was the second odd thing. Not sometimes he wakes up. Not sometimes he calls for us. Sometimes the house settles. Before they left, Marissa stood with her hand on the doorknob and looked at me for too long. "If he asks you to count rooms," she said, "don't make a game of it." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. The door closed behind them. Their car pulled away. The street went quiet except for rain ticking against the gutters. For the first hour, everything was fine. Eli ate half a grilled cheese sandwich. He drank milk through a red straw. He didn't speak, but he pointed when he wanted something, and when I asked if he wanted me to read to him, he shook his head. He only wanted to draw. At 7:32, I noticed every picture he'd made was the same house. Different angles, different sizes, but always the same wrong room perched on top. In some drawings, the room had a tiny door. In others, there was a stick figure inside it with long hair and no face. "That's a cool house," I said, trying to sound casual. "Is it from a show?" Eli pressed the crayon harder until the tip snapped. "No," he said. It startled me because it was the first word he'd spoken. "Whose house is it?" He dragged the broken crayon across the paper, making a thick blue line from the front door to the roof. "Yours." I laughed a little, because that's what adults do when children say something strange, and we don't want them to see us react. "My apartment doesn't even have stairs," I said. Eli looked past me toward the hallway. "It did before." I told myself he meant some imaginary game. Kids in my preschool class said things like that all the time. They invented worlds and rules and invisible friends, and most of the time it meant nothing. Then the baby monitor crackled. Static filled the kitchen, sharp and dry, like someone crumpling wax paper. Underneath it came a voice, low and far away. "Nora Ellis." My name. Not Nora. Not Miss Nora. My full name. I turned so fast my knee hit the table. Eli was right there, sitting 3 feet away, his mouth closed, blue crayon dust on his fingertips. The monitor hissed again. "Don't let her leave early." I picked it up and switched it off. The silence afterward felt worse. I checked the back, found a corroded battery cover, and told myself it was picking up interference. A neighbor's baby monitor. A radio. Some old frequency crossing with another. It sounded ridiculous, but it sounded less ridiculous than a broken plastic box knowing my name. At 8:05, someone knocked on the kitchen window. I jumped hard enough to drop the monitor. An old woman stood outside in the rain, holding a black umbrella tilted so low I could barely see her face. She had white hair pinned flat to her head and a grocery bag tucked against her hip. I opened the back door with the chain still on. "You the sitter?" she asked. "Yes." Her eyes moved past me into the kitchen. "Boy behaving?" "He's fine." She nodded, but not like she believed me. "I'm Mrs. Vale from next door," she said. "If he asks about the small room, you tell him you don't remember." The rain ran off her umbrella in thin silver lines. "What small room?" Her mouth tightened. From the living room, Eli called out, calm and clear, she remembers. Mrs. Vale stepped back so quickly her grocery bag bumped the doorframe. "You call the parents," she said. "You call them now." Then she left, walking through the yard instead of using the path, like she didn't want to pass in front of the windows. I shut the door and locked it. My phone had 23% battery. The app showed Marissa Meyer's number, so I called. No answer. I called again. No answer. A minute later, my phone rang. The number was different. Local but not saved. I answered because I thought maybe Marissa's phone had died. A man said, "Hello? This is David Myers. We got a missed call from this number." His voice was not the voice of the man who had left the house. I stood in the kitchen with the phone pressed so tightly to my ear it hurt. "I'm Nora," I said. "Your babysitter." There was a pause. "Our babysitter?" "For Eli." Another pause. Longer. In the living room, the blue crayon moved across paper in slow, scratchy strokes. The man on the phone said carefully, "Our son is staying at his grandmother's tonight." I didn't breathe. Then a woman's voice came onto the line, farther from the phone but panicked. "Who is in our house with you?" I looked toward the living room. Eli was no longer on the rug. The papers were still there. The blue crayon was still there. But the little boy was gone. I told the Myers to call the police. The real Myers. I don't remember exactly what I said after that. I think I repeated the address 3 times. I think the woman started crying. I know the call dropped before I could ask who Marissa and David had been. My phone screen went black. Dead. The house felt suddenly too big for a ranch. The hallway seemed longer than it had been, stretching past the bathroom and 2 bedrooms into a darkness I didn't remember seeing earlier. "Eli?" I called. No answer. I should have left right then. People always say that when they hear stories like this, they imagine themselves brave and practical, grabbing their keys and walking out. But my purse was in the living room, my car keys were in my purse, and there was a 6-year-old child somewhere in that house. Or something shaped like one. I picked up a kitchen knife, then put it down because the sight of it in my hand made everything feel too real. I grabbed the baby monitor instead. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the only thing in that house that had warned me before. The monitor clicked on by itself. A child's voice whispered, "Count rooms." I walked down the hall. Bathroom on the left. Bedroom on the right. Another bedroom at the end. Laundry closet. That was all. 4 doors. But the monitor crackled. 5. The hallway light flickered. I turned back toward the kitchen, and that was when I saw the blue drawings had changed. They were spread across the coffee table now in a neat row. The first showed me arriving at the house. The second showed Marissa handing me cash. The third showed Mrs. Vale at the kitchen window. The fourth showed me standing in the hallway, holding the baby monitor. The 5th drawing was unfinished. It showed the roof room with the door open. Inside was a small stick figure. Beside it, written in uneven blue letters, was a name I had not said aloud in years. Adam. My brother. Adam Ellis disappeared when I was 9, and he was 5. That's the clean version. The version people can say at school assemblies and on missing posters. The real version is that we were staying with my mother's cousin for a week after our apartment flooded. I was supposed to watch Adam while the adults argued downstairs about money. He wanted to play hide and seek. I told him no. He kept begging. I got annoyed and told him to hide anywhere he wanted. I counted to 30. I never found him. No open doors. No broken windows. No muddy footprints outside. Just his left shoe under the bed and 1 blue crayon on the floor. The police searched for weeks. My mother never said it was my fault, but she stopped saying it wasn't. And now, 13 years later, that name was on a drawing in a house I'd never entered before that night. Except I had. I noticed it all at once. The the way you recognize a song from one note. The dent in the hallway trim where a chair had hit it. The air vent painted shut. The narrow pantry door with a brass hook too high for a child to reach. This was my cousin's old house. It had been remodeled, repainted, renamed by real estate listings and new owners, but it was the place where Adam vanished. The place my mind had spent half my life sanding down until it became blank. Behind me, Eli spoke. "Your turn to count." He stood at the end of the hall in front of a door that had not been there a moment earlier. It was small, too small for an adult, cut into the wall between the bedroom and the bathroom, its knob made of cloudy glass. His sleeves had fallen back. On his wrist was a paper hospital bracelet. I could read the faded print. "Ellis, Adam." My legs went weak, but I stayed standing. "You're not Eli," I said. The boy smiled without showing his teeth, just like the fake father had. "No," he said. "He's at his grandmother's." The small door opened inward. A smell came out, cold and dusty, like rainwater trapped under floorboards. Beyond the door was not a closet. It was a narrow room with slanted walls and old wallpaper covered in blue scribbles. I saw children's names, dates, little handprints, a cracked plastic nightlight shaped like a moon. In the center of the room sat Adam's missing shoe. Not a shoe like his actual shoe. Red canvas, white rubber toe, one loose lace. I reached for it before I thought. The boy grabbed my wrist. His fingers were small, but his grip had the weight of an adult hand pressing through water. "You said hide anywhere," he whispered. The baby monitor screamed. Not static. A woman's voice. My mother's voice. "Nora, don't go in." I pulled back so hard my shoulder hit the wall. The hallway lights went out. In the dark, the house made a sound I can still hear when I'm half asleep. A long wooden inhale. Boards shifting. Pipes knocking. Nails pulling loose one by one. The small door widened. Not physically, not the way a door should. The darkness inside simply took up more space. Eli or Adam, or whatever wore that child's shape, stepped aside. "You were expected," he said. Behind him, in the little room, someone began counting. 1. It was my voice as a child. 2. I ran. I didn't think about the purse anymore. I didn't think about the keys. I hit the front door with both hands, but the deadbolt wouldn't turn. The porch light outside flickered blue through the glass, though it had been yellow when I arrived. 3. I grabbed the plastic goose from beside the door and smashed it through the narrow window panel. Rain blew in. The alarm didn't go off. Glass cut my sleeve, but not deep. I reached through, found the outside latch, and yanked the door open. The house pulled back. That's the only way I can describe it. The air tightened around my waist like an arm. The hallway stretched behind me, impossibly long, and at the far end the small room waited with its door open. 4. I fell onto the porch, crawled down the steps, and ran barefoot across the wet grass because I had lost my shoes somewhere inside. Mrs. Vale was already in her doorway. She didn't look surprised. She just shouted, "Don't turn around until you reach the street." So I didn't. Police arrived within minutes. The real Myers arrived right after, their faces gray and frightened. Their son Eli was safe at his grandmother's, asleep on a couch 20 miles away. The officers searched the house. They found my purse in the living room, my shoes in the hall, the babysitting cash on the kitchen table. They did not find the small door. They did not find the roof room. They did not find the baby monitor. When I asked about the drawings, one officer held up the stack of paper with a tired expression and said, "These?" They were blank. Every page. 2 days later, Mrs. Vale called me. I don't know how she got my number. Maybe from the police report. Maybe from the same place the house got my name. She told me families had been moving in and out of that house for 30 years. Some stayed months. Some stayed one night. There were stories, but never enough proof. Missing pets. Children talking to empty corners. Sitters leaving early and refusing to explain why. Then she said something I didn't understand until later. "It doesn't keep the children," she told me. "It keeps the moment you lost them." I moved 3 weeks after that. New apartment. New number. New job at a daycare with security cameras in every hallway. I threw away the clothes I wore that night. I stopped babysitting. I stopped driving down streets with yellow ranch houses. For a while, nothing happened. Then last October, on what would have been Adam's 18th birthday, I came home from work and found a folded piece of paper taped to my apartment door. No envelope, no stamp, just paper, soft from the rain, with blue crayon bleeding through the back. I stood in the hallway for almost 5 minutes before I opened it. The drawing showed my new apartment building. 4 floors, 6 windows across, my car in the lot, my curtains, my door. On the roof, drawn carefully in blue, was a small crooked room that didn't belong there. And inside it, a child had written, "Nora is still counting." Story 7. The first thing Noah said to me was, "You shouldn't have parked in the driveway." I remember laughing a little, because I thought he was being weird in that little kid way, like when they repeat something they heard an adult say. He was standing at the top of the stairs in dinosaur pajamas, holding one sock in his hand, staring down at me like he'd been waiting all night. I was 17 then, a senior in high school, and I lived in a smaller city outside Columbus, Ohio. Not tiny, but small enough that people still noticed unfamiliar cars on quiet streets. I babysat on weekends because my mom's hours had been cut at the dental office, and I was trying to save for community college without making her feel worse than she already did. So when a woman named Claire Bennett messaged me through a local babysitting group at 5:40 on a rainy Friday evening, offering almost triple my normal rate for 4 hours, I said yes before asking enough questions. That was my first mistake. The Bennetts lived in a neighborhood where every house looked like it had been wiped clean. Long driveways, big windows, neatly trimmed hedges even though it was October, and everything else in town looked dead and wet. Their house sat near the end of a cul-de-sac, 2 stories, gray brick, black shutters, warm porch lights glowing through the rain. Claire opened the door before I even knocked. She was pretty in a tired way, with her hair pinned up too tightly and mascara smudged under one eye. Her husband, David, stood behind her holding car keys, checking the street over my shoulder. "You're Maya?" Claire asked. I nodded and wiped rain off my jacket. "Yeah. Sorry, I parked in the driveway. I didn't know if..." "That's fine," she said too fast. David smiled, but it didn't move much past his mouth. "We're just running late. That should have been nothing. Adults are stressed. Rich people are stressed too, I guess." But the whole entrance felt like I'd stepped into the middle of an argument that had stopped right before the door opened. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something baked, like cookies that had been taken out of the oven too early. There were family pictures on the wall by the staircase. Noah at the zoo. Noah with Claire and David at the beach. Noah missing 2 front teeth. Normal stuff. Except there was another picture tucked lower, half hidden behind a tall vase on the entry table. A teenage girl with straight brown hair stood next to Noah, smiling with one hand on his shoulder. I noticed it because she looked around my age, and because Claire saw me looking and shifted the vase slightly in front of it. "Noah's already eaten," Claire said. "He can have 1 show before bed. He may ask for snacks. He doesn't need them." David added, "He gets anxious around new people." Then Claire leaned closer. Her voice dropped. "One rule, don't let him go into the basement." I almost smiled because it sounded like the setup to a bad, scary movie, but her face was so tense that I didn't. "Okay," I said. "Is there something dangerous down there?" "Storage," David answered. Claire kept looking at me. "Just don't open that door." The basement door was in the hallway off the kitchen. White, ordinary, with a brass knob and a little slide lock at the top. The kind meant to keep toddlers from wandering downstairs. It was locked already. They gave me emergency numbers, pointed out Noah's inhaler even though he almost never needed it, and left in a black SUV. David backed out of the driveway slowly, like he didn't want the headlights to touch the windows too long. Then the house went quiet. Not normal quiet. It had that thick quiet expensive houses have, where the fridge hum sounds too loud and your own footsteps feel rude. Noah stood in the living room doorway watching me. "You can watch 1 show," I told him. "I don't like TV at night." "Okay. Board game." He shook his head. He was 6, but he didn't act 6. He didn't fidget. He didn't ask a million questions. He just studied me like he was checking whether I was safe to talk to. After a few minutes, he said, "Did they tell you what happened to the last sitter?" I gave him the babysitter smile. "The one you use when a kid is trying to freak you out." "No, but I'm guessing you're about to." He looked toward the hallway. She didn't listen. A cold little feeling moved through my chest, but I pushed it away. Kids repeat stuff. Kids hear one adult say one weird sentence and build a whole story around it. What was her name? I asked, keeping my voice light. Noah pressed his lips together. Emily. That name hit weird because my best friend was named Emily, and for a second I pictured her in this house instead of me. Well, I said, I'm a very good listener. No, you're not, he said. I laughed once, but it came out fake. Rain tapped against the tall living room windows. Somewhere upstairs, the house creaked. The furnace clicked on, pushing warm air through the vents with a low rushing sound. I tried to make the night normal. I found crayons in a cabinet and asked Noah if he wanted to draw. He drew a house, then a car, then 4 stick figures, a man, a woman, a boy, and a girl. The girl had X's over her eyes. I stared at it too long. Noah noticed and calmly folded the paper in half. Where are your parents tonight? I asked. Those aren't my parents. He said it so plainly that I froze. Then he looked up at me and added, They told me I have to say they are. I felt the room shrink. I wanted to ask more, but right then there was a sound from somewhere below us. Knock. One single knock. Not loud, not dramatic, just wood on wood, dull and patient. I turned toward the hallway. The basement door was still closed. Noah, I whispered, was that you? He shook his head. Another knock came, then 2 more. Knock. Knock. I stood up so fast the chair scraped the hardwood. I checked the front door first. Locked. Deadbolt turned. Chain in place. I looked through the side window, saw only rain shining under the porch light, and my little silver Corolla sitting in the driveway. I checked the back door. Locked. The kitchen windows. Locked. Everything was locked. Behind me, Noah said, It's not outside. My skin went tight. I turned around. He was standing in the kitchen entrance, too still, arms hanging by his sides. What do you mean? He didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the basement door. I walked toward it, even though every part of me was telling me not to. The slide lock was still pushed into place. I put my ear near the door. Nothing. Then something brushed the other side. I jumped back so hard my shoulder hit the wall. Noah whispered, Sometimes they play the recordings when they leave. I looked at him. What recordings? His face changed then. Not much, but enough. The serious mask cracked, and for the first time he looked like a scared little boy. The people. My mouth went dry. I called Claire. Straight to voicemail. I called David. Straight to voicemail. I texted Claire. Everything okay? Noah is upset, and I'm hearing noises. The message turned green. Not delivered. I told myself the house had bad service. I told myself there was probably a speaker system in the basement, maybe old pipes, maybe the furnace. But my hands were shaking. I took Noah upstairs because I didn't want to be near that door. The second floor hallway was dim, lit by a single lamp on a table near the linen closet. Noah's bedroom was normal. Too normal. Blue comforter. Space posters. A plastic bin of cars. A nightlight shaped like a moon. Across the hall was a guest room. The door was open, and inside, on the dresser, were more framed pictures. One of them showed Noah with the same teenage girl from downstairs. She was wearing a red hoodie, standing in the Bennett's backyard, holding up a peace sign. I stepped closer. Something about her face bothered me. Not because I recognized her exactly, but because I felt like I had seen her in the kind of place nobody wants to be seen. On flyers. On shared posts. On missing person pages people scroll past and then feel guilty about forgetting. I pulled out my phone and searched. Missing babysitter Emily, Columbus, Ohio, Bennett Street. At first nothing useful came up. Then I changed Bennett to the neighborhood name. Then, Emily babysitter missing October. There it was. A local article from 3 years earlier. 16-year-old Emily Hart had gone missing after babysitting on Briar Glen Drive. Police said she had left the home before the parents returned. Her car was found 2 days later behind a closed grocery store 5 miles away. The article had a photo. Same brown hair. Same smile. Same girl in the frame. I felt something inside me drop, so hard I almost sat down on the floor. Noah stood in the doorway, watching me read. She helped me, he said quietly. With what? I wanted to call my grandma. I looked at him. Your grandma? He nodded. My real grandma. Her name is Linda. She lives in Dayton. That detail was so normal it made it worse. I crouched down in front of him. Noah, I need you to tell me the truth. Are Claire and David your parents? He shook his head. Are they related to you? My mom knew Claire, he said. From work. I was little. I don't remember everything. Downstairs, the knocking started again. This time it was faster. Not loud. Just steady. Knock. 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 Then a voice came through the floor. A girl's voice. Please. Please let me out. I stopped breathing. Noah grabbed my sleeve. It's not real right now. What does that mean? It's from before. The voice continued, muffled under the floorboards. Crying. Begging. Then a man's voice said something I couldn't understand, followed by a thump that made Noah flinch. That was enough. I picked him up, even though he was too big to carry comfortably, and I moved fast down the stairs. My plan was simple. Get outside. Get to my car. Drive anywhere with lights and people. But when I reached the front door, the chain was still on, and there was a new lock above it. A keypad lock. It had not been there when I came in. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds impossible, but I think it had been hidden behind the open door when Claire first let me in, and once they left, it had slid or clicked into place remotely. I don't know. I just know I tried the door, and it would not open. The back door was the same, locked from the inside with a keypad box covering the deadbolt. My hands went numb. Noah whispered, "They don't like when people leave early." I dialed 911. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then one bar appeared. The call connected, but the audio crackled badly. 911, what is your emergency? I spoke too fast. I'm babysitting at 118 Briar Glen Drive. I think a child is being held here illegally. The doors are locked. There are recordings in the basement. There was a missing babysitter here, Emily Hart. Please send police. The operator asked me to repeat the address. I did. She told me to stay on the line, find a safe place, and not confront anyone. That would have been easier if headlights hadn't swept across the front windows. Noah made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. They're back. I looked outside. The black SUV rolled into the driveway behind my car, blocking it in. For a second I couldn't move. My brain just refused. It kept trying to turn the whole night into a misunderstanding. Then David stepped out of the driver's seat. Claire got out slowly, carrying her purse, looking up at the house like she already knew. The 911 operator was still talking in my ear. I whispered, "They're here. Can you hide?" I grabbed Noah's hand and ran toward the kitchen. The basement door was closest. I hated that. I hated it so much. But the parents were coming through the front door, and there was nowhere else downstairs that locked from the inside. The slide lock was easy to open. The basement smelled cold and dusty, like wet cardboard and old carpet. I pulled Noah down the stairs and shut the door behind us as quietly as I could. There was no lock on our side. I moved into the dark, phone screen glowing in my hand. The basement wasn't finished. Concrete floor, metal shelves, plastic storage bins labeled with things like winter and taxes and camping. Then my light landed on a folding table. On it were stacks of papers, birth certificates, school forms, laminated IDs, a small recorder, several old phones lined up with sticky notes on them. One note said, "Emily, October 12th. I felt sick. On another shelf were children's clothes in vacuum-sealed bags, different sizes, different years. There were printed photos of Noah with different haircuts, different names written on the back. Noah had both hands over his ears. The recording was louder down there, coming from a speaker tucked near the ceiling. Emily's voice played again. "Please let me out." Then footsteps crossed the kitchen above us. Claire called softly, "Maya?" She sounded calm, almost bored. David said, "Check upstairs." Claire's voice came closer to the basement door. "Noah, honey?" Noah started crying silently. No noise, just tears. The door handle turned. I backed up with him until my shoulder hit a metal shelf. Claire opened the door and looked down into the dark. For a second, her face was only a shape against the kitchen light. Then she smiled. "Did Noah tell you stories again?" I didn't answer. David appeared behind her. His smile was gone. "Maya," he said, like a teacher disappointed in a student. "Come upstairs and we can talk." I still had the 911 call open. I lowered the phone behind my leg, praying they couldn't see the screen. Claire started coming down the steps. Slow. Careful. Noah gets confused, she said. He has a very active imagination. We told you not to let him down here. He's not your son, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Claire's face changed. Not anger exactly. More like a curtain dropping. David rushed down the stairs. I yanked one of the metal shelves as hard as I could. It tipped sideways with a horrible crash, bins exploding across the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. David stumbled, swearing, and Claire screamed, not scared, just furious. I grabbed Noah and ran behind the fallen shelf toward a small window near the ceiling. It was one of those basement hopper windows, narrow but not impossible. I shoved it open. Rain blew in. Noah climbed first because he was small. I pushed him from below while he scraped and kicked and sobbed. For one awful second he got stuck at the hips, and David's hand caught the back of my hoodie. I twisted out of it. I still don't know how. I left the hoodie in his hand. Noah dropped outside into the wet grass. I climbed after him, tearing my arm on the window frame. It hurt, but I barely felt it. We ran barefoot because I'd lost one shoe on the stairs. Across the backyard, through hedges, over a low fence into the neighbor's yard. A porch light snapped on. An older man stepped outside holding a phone. I screamed, "Call 911. He shouted, "I already did." That man's name was Mr. Alvarez. He later told police he had seen my car boxed in and heard the crash from the basement. He said he'd always thought something was off about that house, but never had a reason to say anything. Police arrived in less than 4 minutes. Claire and David tried to tell them I was a confused babysitter who had broken into their storage room and tried to abduct their child. They were calm when the first officers arrived. Too calm. Then the 911 operator confirmed my call had been active the whole time. Then officers found the documents. Then they found the recordings. Emily Hart's case was reopened that night. I won't pretend I know everything that happened to her. I know what police told my mother, and I know what was in the news later. Emily had tried to help Noah contact his biological grandmother. She disappeared before she could show anyone what she'd found. There wasn't enough evidence for every answer, but there was enough to arrest the Bennetts on kidnapping, identity fraud, unlawful restraint, and charges connected to Emily's disappearance. Noah's real name wasn't Noah Bennett. I'm not going to say his real name. He deserves one part of his life that strangers don't get to take. I spent that night at the hospital getting my arm cleaned and bandaged. My mom cried so hard she couldn't talk. A detective asked me to go through my statement 3 separate times, and each time I got stuck on the same stupid detail. The sock Noah had been holding when I walked in. One little blue sock. I kept thinking he must have been waiting there for whoever came next, trying to decide if this babysitter would listen or if she would leave him alone again. People online called me brave after the story came out. I wasn't brave. I was broke. I was tired. I ignored things because I needed money, and because adults in nice houses don't look like the kind of people you're supposed to fear. That's the part one still can't shake. Not the basement. Not the recordings. Not even Claire's face when she asked if Noah had told me stories again. It's the driveway. Because Noah knew before I did. He knew they'd block my car in. He knew the doors would lock. He knew the house was built to make leaving feel impossible. I still babysit sometimes, but never at night. Never at houses I don't already know. And when a child says something strange, I don't laugh it off anymore. Kids make things up, sure. But sometimes they're not trying to scare you. Sometimes they're trying to survive.